Hi, I'm Lizzie, this is Laura. Today is our second part of our review about MSC's Virtuosa. We sailed on board in May 2023 on a 5-day cruise.
This review, we spoke about the parts of the ship that we loved and things we really enjoyed on board. If you haven't seen that already, check that out on our channel and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our content. In this video, we're going to be talking about the things we weren't as keen on board.
The first thing that I suppose was just a bit irritating were queues. Now we know it's a very British thing to do, to queue, but there just seem to be queues for absolutely everything.
Yeah, it started at embarkation and it didn't stop for the entire duration of the cruise, right up until disembarkation. We still had to queue for everything.
Embarkation, the queue, well, to be honest, it was a bit ridiculous because we were there for the time that we should have been there for, and they never once checked what time we had, and it was basically a free-for-all.
It was.
That whatever time you got to the port at, you could get on. There were people that we spoke to that had told us they'd got there at 10 o'clock in the morning and been allowed on board. And we'd actually stopped at services to make sure that we didn't get there before our time because of our experience with other cruise lines.
And there was just no communication either. For the first massive part of that queue was just to drop your luggage off. And we saw people that had been and dropped their luggage off separately and then had to rejoin that queue again because you had to still go through that part of the queue in order to get to the rest of the queue.
We knew the ship was going to be really, really busy because it was half term and we had seen that it was a sold out cruise. So we did expect there to be an element of queues, but it just seemed to be everything we did.
Yeah, and we are used to cruising on, busy ships during school holidays because that's the only time we can cruise. So we can make direct comparisons from our experience on other cruise lines, and we could definitely tell it had a busier feel about it on board Virtuosa.
The queues to get off the ship when we were in port.
Yeah.
I would say ports, but
we didn't really make it anywhere, did we? We've never really experienced that massively before on other cruise lines.
Because we tend to not rush off at the time when we expect it to be busy, but it just was busy the whole time to get off. Obviously there were massive queues in the buffet.
Yes.
A lot of the time there were queues to get into the theatre for shows, which again we've experienced slight queues before, but these were quite long.
Yeah. The Galleria often was full of queue for something or somewhere. And
then it just quite made us laugh at the end that we had to queue to get off the ship. So it looked like everything was going to time and you got your time to get off the ship, but then we got called at that time and then it was probably another 20 minutes until we were actually off the ship. Yeah. Because you had to stand in another queue.
And then on the same topic really, that busyness extended to it being quite difficult to find a seat in the venues that you wanted to go to. We had to walk out of the Sky Lounge a couple of times because there was nowhere to sit in there. The Virtuosa Lounge that venue is just far too small for the size of the ship, really, isn't it?
They do a lot of quizzes and things in there, and you could see people were often standing around the side because there just wasn't anywhere to sit.
Yeah, we only sat in there once, and that was on a port day when we actually didn't get off the ship.
And it was still even busy then in there.
And
Masters of the Seas you couldn't get.
Yeah,
we
never got a seat inside, did we?
And you often would walk along the outside part and you couldn't get a seat. I managed it when I fell over.
And then sun lounges as well were hard to come by. We didn't have much great weather on this cruise, but when it was sunny, there was absolutely zero chance of getting a sun lounger around that main pool. You could have gone to the pool at the back of the ship and
but
done
it was
all right
cold there, so you wouldn't have particularly wanted to sit there. The other place where it can be quite difficult to get a seat is the buffet. So we'd read, go to the back of the buffet, you'll always get a seat. And there was actually one day when we couldn't find a seat, other than there's a little outside area that we sat outside because it was a cloudy, overcast day.
It wasn't the warmest, but it was quite sheltered, so it was okay to sit there.
So if you're ever struggling, have a look at that bit out there. I wouldn't fancy sitting out there if it was freezing. So as we mentioned in our previous video, we had a set dining time and We love doing that. We requested late dining.
We did. We chose second sitting.
However, we didn't actually realise how late it would be because there was actually 3 sittings. So the timing of dinner wasn't until 9:45 p.m, which is extremely late to be eating your dinner at.
Yeah, when we didn't know the dining time until we were given our cruise card, and it was printed on that cruise card, and we were gobsmacked by it.
I actually said, do you think they've made a printing error here?
Yeah, we actually took a photo of that and uploaded it to our Instagram account straight away, and we were like, is this for real?
So we loved our dining table. The waiters were brilliant that we had, and we had such a good time. However, because of the timing of our table, it meant that we missed out on a big part of the entertainment.
Yeah, we essentially couldn't go to any of the events in the Galleria because they were always during our dinner time. So the White Party, the ABBA one, was it called Let's ABBA Party?
Yeah, Silent Disco.
Yeah, Silent Disco. We got to the Silent Disco before it had finished, and there were headsets there, but the staff wouldn't let us have those headsets.
They said we had to be there earlier. I mean, we explained to them, and they were like, well, that's not our problem, type of thing.
So it was a bit disappointing, and it did feel like those parties are like one of MSC's big selling points. So it felt like we missed out on a big chunk of that. Something else we were a bit disappointed with was our cabin. We had an inside cabin. The decor in there was great. Absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. The bathroom was fine, well set up. But there was just no storage in there. There was a vast amount of empty space, which was bizarre. But there was just nowhere to keep anything. We had nowhere to put our shoes. And the wardrobe space was very, very small.
We were only on board, as we've said, for 5 nights. So we didn't have that much with us. But if you're on a 2-week cruise, I don't think you'd even be able to fit your clothes into the wardrobe.
Yeah, and you know, we appreciate we booked an inside cabin, so they are smaller, but we have cruised in some really well appointed inside cabins, and this was just really lacking for us. And it's not like there wasn't the space in that cabin to include more storage, they just left it empty.
There will be a full cabin review to follow, which will give a little bit more detail about the inside of the cabin. As we said, we actually liked the cabin, there just wasn't enough storage space.
So make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss it. And then this one, some people are probably going to think this is a little bit beyond MSC's control, but the ports for us on this cruise were a bit of a letdown. And yes, we were aware of what the ports were when we booked the cruise. However, we weren't aware of the logistics involved with one in particular. So we were in Rotterdam,
which is a great port, and we would highly recommend people go to Rotterdam. It's a brilliant city, lots of places there to explore. We'd only been there 6 weeks early, so we thought we'd take it easy on that day and not do a lot because we were excited about 2 new ports that were coming up.
The second port was Ringaskiddy, which was the port for Cork on this cruise. We'd never been there, and we were looking forward to being able to experience this. We weren't necessarily going to go into Cork. We weren't sure what our plan for the day was. However, there was an issue with this port. Ringaskiddy is an industrial port, and as with industrial ports, the only way of disembarking the ship is via a shuttle bus.
It's for safety reasons because obviously it's a working port.
Yeah, but the big problem with this was that there were only 5 buses allocated for MSC Virtuosa.
And there's over 6,000 passengers on board.
Yeah, and these weren't massive, buses. They were local buses that had been just used for this purpose. So it just wasn't going to work for people to get off at this port. In
the theatre the night before, the cruise director came on after the show. He was very visible. He was always around, and he was actively discouraging people to get off. He was saying, I'd stay on the ship if I were you, basically, in a roundabout type of way.
Yeah, they put a full entertainment programme on as though it was a sea day, essentially. And we also got back to our cabin that evening to a letter, again, discouraging us from getting off the ship in Ringaskiddy. So, wanting to be obliging, we did decide not to get off at this port. We were just not wanting to get involved in the chaos. And we did hear some horror stories from people on board that had got off and didn't enjoy their experience, but also, you know, equally some people did get off and have a great time.
They did a ticketing system just like it was a tender, where you had to go and pick up a ticket, and we had the great delight of having to listen to the letters being called out all morning. But if you didn't pick up your ticket by a certain time, you
just couldn't get off the ship at all.
Yeah.
They were still calling letters out at lunchtime, weren't they?
The third port was Falmouth, and we were quite excited to go to Falmouth because we've never actually been to a port on mainland England before. We have been to Falmouth before as children, but neither of us could really remember it.
I don't remember going at all.
So we were, as I said, we were excited to go. And also, it was a tender port. And I'm not a massive fan of tender boats, but we were excited because we'd got priority disembarkation tickets for tender.
Yes. So we'd status matched from our princess status, actually, and had ended up with gold with MSC in their Voyagers Club, which meant we got priority tender disembarkation. And we had those tickets delivered to our room the night before, and we were really pleased with it. Also, we wanted to get some good photos of the ship, which is what tendering is always great for.
However, our plans got scuppered by the weather. Now, we are fully understanding, and that is not MSC's fault whatsoever.
No.
That the weather stopped it from happening. However, on a 5-day cruise, when you know that could possibly happen, and then the port previous to it logistically isn't good for the size of the ship, to only have them one decent port is a bit disappointing.
Yeah, and we were quite late docking, weren't we, in Rotterdam also?
Yeah.
It wasn't a 7 a.m. start in Rotterdam, so yeah, it just wasn't sufficient really for that cruise.
And then finally, just something that really irritated me was the soap. I know it sounds really bizarre saying it like that, but in the toilets, which were always really clean, nicely presented, you would have the sinks with the water would be automatic, and then supposedly automatic soap dispensers.
Yeah.
However, it was like, again, trying to find ones with soap in, and sometimes you just couldn't find one with soap in. Now, I suppose, well, just being cruisers, we're always really aware of the cleanliness on board.
Yeah.
But I suppose, especially since COVID and the fact that we travelled on board during COVID, it makes you even more aware of the fact that it just didn't seem right that you couldn't get soap everywhere.
And there wasn't really sanitizer around the ship either. I don't think we've ever been on a cruise before we've had to use our own sanitizer, but we did have to on Virtuosa, which was bizarre to us.
So just something to maybe be aware of, that the soap dispenser didn't always seem to work. And I don't know if it was because there was no soap in them or if it was because they just didn't work.
But yeah, take your own sanitizer with you if you're conscious about that. Overall, we did have a good time on our cruise. We always enjoy a cruise, so we did enjoy ourselves, but I suppose the jury's still out on whether we'd cruise with MSC again following that.
We feel like we would like to sail with them again, the problem being that the times when we can sail with them in school holidays is that the ship is always going to be that busy, and just sometimes you just don't want that amount of people around you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it might be that we choose to sail MSC from a different country, something like that, so that it's not so orientated around UK school holidays when we're on board.
But we'll never say never. You'll probably see us sailing on board MSC in school holidays next year, now we've said that.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like if you've enjoyed watching it, and if you've got any questions at all about our experience on board MSC Virtuosa, drop them in the comments down below. And whilst you're here, please make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on social media by searching Sisters on the Seas.